You've probably called a horror villain insane and felt like that word explained everything. But in Halloween, the doctor who studied Michael Myers for 15 years didn't even stop there. He called him evil. Not troubled, not sick, not misunderstood. Evil. Loomis says he spent 8 years trying to reach Michael, then 7 more trying to keep him locked away. And after all that time, the best explanation he can give is not a diagnosis. It's a surrender. A blank face, pale skin, black eyes, the devil's eyes. That line works because it gives the audience permission to stop asking questions. Michael Myers isn't a person anymore. He's a shape, a mask, a walking answer. But here's the problem. Horror does this all the time. Jason Voorhees gets called a mindless killer. John Kramer gets called a psychopath. Jack Torrance becomes Crazy Jack. Patrick Bateman gets flattened into a sociopath. Norman Bates becomes the old shorthand for split personality. 6 villains, 1 lazy label. Insane. But what if that word is not the explanation? What if it's the moment we stopped looking? Because the scariest thing about these characters isn't that they make no sense. It's that each one follows a pattern. And once you see the pattern, the word insane starts to feel too small. Before the masks became icons, each of these stories had a smaller starting point. Michael Myers begins as a 6-year-old boy in an ordinary house in Haddonfield, Illinois. On Halloween night in 1963, he kills his older sister. The film gives almost nothing else. No long abuse history, no speech, no clear motive the audience can hold in its hand. That emptiness becomes the point. Michael doesn't explain himself because the movie refuses to give us the comfort of an explanation. Jason Voorhees starts somewhere completely different. Before the hockey mask, before the sequels turned him into something almost supernatural, he was a child at Camp Crystal Lake. The story says he drowned while counselors weren't watching. His mother, Pamela, could not live inside that loss. And when she dies too, Jason's world narrows around one dead person. John Kramer is not introduced as a monster first. He was a civil engineer, a husband, a man expecting a son named Gideon. Then his wife's clinic is robbed. A door slams into her body. The pregnancy is lost. Later, cancer arrives. Then a failed suicide attempt leaves him alive. That sequence matters, because Jigsaw is not born from randomness. He crawls out of wreckage with a new belief. Suffering has meaning. Jack Torrance is frightening for the opposite reason. He looks normal before he looks dangerous. At the start of The Shining, he sits in a job interview, smiling, joking, trying to sound like a man who can handle a winter alone with his family. He has a resume, a wife, a son, a writing project. But Wendy has already learned how to soften the truth. When a doctor asks about Danny's injured shoulder, she explains that Jack came home drunk, pulled the boy's arm, and dislocated it. She says it carefully, too carefully. You've probably heard someone do that in real life. Not lie exactly, just sand down the edges of what happened so the family can keep moving. Patrick Bateman begins inside a different kind of prison. Not a hospital, not a camp, an office, a restaurant reservation, a business card. His world is built from status signals so tiny most people would laugh at them. But to him, they decide who exists. And then Norman Bates, a quiet motel owner. Polite, nervous, almost boyish. The kind of man you might underestimate because he seems more trapped than threatening, until you learn what lives in the house above the motel. So before we talk about psychology, notice the pattern already forming. These villains are not written as random explosions. Each one is built around a center. Emptiness, grief, belief, rage, status, mother. And the horror starts when that center takes over everything else. Now watch what each character does when that center starts running the whole system. Michael Myers never behaves like someone trying to win a fight. He doesn't rush, he doesn't plead, he doesn't explain. He walks, always walks. And in one of the most disturbing small moments in Halloween, he pins Bob to the wall, steps back, and tilts his head. Not rage, not panic, study. That tiny movement tells you more than a speech would. Michael looks at the body like he's checking whether the world in front of him is real enough to matter. That's why the label evil feels powerful, but also strangely incomplete. It describes how he feels to others. It doesn't explain what his behavior is doing. Jason's pattern is louder, but also more human underneath. His target keeps circling back to Camp Crystal Lake. Counselors, young people. The category his mother blamed for everything. Then, Ginny finds the shack, not just a hiding place, a shrine. Pamela's head, her clothes, candles. Objects arranged around a woman who is gone and somehow still controlling the room. Ginny understands the pattern before the audience has time to. She puts on Pamela's sweater. She speaks to Jason as his mother, and for a moment, the weapon stops. That pause is the whole character, not the mask, the pause. You've seen smaller versions of this too. Someone loses a person, then keeps the room, the clothes, the routine, the same chair at the table. Not because objects are magic, because letting go would mean admitting the death happened all the way. John Kramer takes pain and turns it into grammar. He doesn't say torture, he says test. He doesn't say victim, he says subject. He doesn't say murder, he says choice. In Saw 2, he insists, "I've never murdered anyone in my life. The decisions are up to them." That sentence is chilling, because he isn't screaming it, he isn't laughing, he sounds calm, organized, almost reasonable. And that's the trap inside the trap. John's machines are physical, but his real mechanism is linguistic. He renames harm until it sounds like rehabilitation. He hands responsibility to the person already tied to the situation he designed. Jack Torrance is different because his pattern is domestic before it becomes supernatural. The Overlook Hotel is scary, yes, but the family was already walking on broken glass. Wendy tells the doctor about Danny's shoulder as if she's reading from a script she has rehearsed too many times. Jack was drunk, he pulled the boy's arm, it got dislocated. It's in the past. He stopped drinking. The words are calm. The facts are not. Later, when Wendy finds Jack's pages, the mask drops. Page after page says the same thing. All work and no play makes Jack a dull boy. Not a novel, not a draft, just repetition. Hundreds of lines where progress was supposed to be. That is the moment she realizes the danger wasn't arriving from outside the hotel. It had been sitting in the room, typing. Patrick Bateman's pattern is almost ridiculous, until it isn't. The business card scenes should be funny. 4 men in suits compare tiny rectangles of paper. Bone coloring, lettering, thickness, a watermark. Nothing here should matter. Then Paul Allen's card appears. Patrick's face changes. His breathing tightens. His hand trembles. He sweats over a font. The violence in American Psycho is often debated. Real, imagined, exaggerated, symbolic. But that scene doesn't need the debate. The injury is visible. A better card lands on the table, and Patrick's self-worth starts to collapse. This is where a small mirror gets uncomfortable. Most of us don't live like Patrick Bateman, but many people know that little hit of panic when someone else gets the praise, the room, the invitation, the title, the table you wanted. Status wounds can look absurd from the outside. From the inside, they can feel like erasure. And Norman Bates gives the cleanest trap of all. For most of Psycho, the audience thinks Norman is covering for his mother. After Marion Crane is killed, he reacts with horror. He cleans, he wraps, he carries, he sinks the car. The scene works because Norman seems like a son protecting someone else. Then the ending turns the entire film around. Mother is dead. The woman in the house is not a living parent. She is a body, a voice, a role, a presence. Norman has kept alive because accepting her death would destroy the structure holding him together. And suddenly the cleanup scene means something else. Norman wasn't hiding evidence for another person. He was protecting a split reality he could not survive losing. So look at all 6 again. Michael doesn't explain. Jason preserves. John renames. Jack erupts. Patrick compares. Norman divides. None of that excuses them, but it does show something important. Insane is not specific enough for behavior this organized. So what are we really looking at? Not 6 medical diagnoses. That's the wrong frame. These are fictional characters, built for fear, exaggeration, and myth. You can't sit Michael Myers in a clinic. You can't diagnose Jason from a campfire legend. You can't turn Norman Bates into a neat mental health lesson without doing damage to real people who live with dissociation. So the useful question is not, what disorder does each villain have? The useful question is, why do we keep wanting one word to finish the conversation? Psychologists call one version of this the fundamental attribution error. In plain English, it means we often explain someone's behavior by who we think they are, instead of asking what might be happening around them, inside them, or before them. We see a person explode and say, he's violent. We see someone freeze and say, she's cold. We see control and call it strength. We see grief and call it obsession. We see status panic and call it arrogance. Sometimes those words are not wrong, but they are incomplete. That's the important part. A label can be accurate enough to feel satisfying and still be too shallow to explain the pattern. Michael gets called evil because his silence feels inhuman. Jason gets called mindless because his grief is hidden under a mask. John gets called a psychopath because his traps are cruel, even though his own language is built around moral purpose. Jack gets called crazy because the final image is so loud that people forget the family was already adapting to him. Patrick gets called a sociopath because it sounds cleaner than looking at the empty status machine around him. Norman gets used as shorthand for split personality, even though psycho is really about a mind trying to cancel a death it cannot accept. And this is where the story gets ethically important. Real mental illness is not horror violence. Real dissociation is not Norman Bates. Real grief is not Jason Voorhees. Real depersonalization, paranoia, rage, narcissistic injury, or identity fragmentation does not automatically make someone dangerous. Horror takes mechanisms and turns them into monsters. That's what the genre does. But if we copy the genre's shortcut in real life, we create stigma. We start believing that a person with a mental health condition is automatically frightening, unpredictable, or less human. That's not insight. That's fear wearing a medical costume. So here's the line the script has to walk. We're not saying these villains are patients. We're saying these villains are nightmares built from recognizable mechanisms. And those mechanisms are why they laughed. A random killer is scary once. A patterned killer is scary forever. Because the audience can feel a logic it doesn't want to recognize. Michael is not frightening because he has no pattern. He's frightening because his pattern refuses connection. Jason is not frightening because he has no feeling. He's frightening because one feeling controls everything. John is not frightening because he lacks intelligence. He's frightening because intelligence serves the wrong belief. Jack is not frightening because he becomes someone else. He's frightening because the worst version of him was already in the house. Patrick is not frightening because he has no self. He's frightening because his self depends on being seen as superior. Norman is not frightening because Mother exists. He's frightening because losing her was so impossible that his mind built a room where she never left. And now, the easy word falls apart. Insane. It sounded like an explanation. It was really a stop sign. Behavior isn't always the explanation. Sometimes behavior is the signal. Most of us won't live inside a horror movie. You won't meet Michael Myers in a hallway. You won't find Jason's shrine in the woods. You won't wake up in one of John Kramer's traps. And you won't check into the Bates Motel by accident. But the mental shortcut is familiar. Someone changes, and people rush to explain it. A father starts exploding over small things, and the family says, that's just his temper. A coworker can't handle another person's success, and everyone says, he's just arrogant. Someone keeps a dead person's room untouched for years, and people whisper, she needs to move on. A person becomes cold, silent, controlling, or strange, and the first explanation is usually a character judgment. Sometimes that judgment protects you. If someone is dangerous, cruel, or manipulative, you don't need a perfect explanation before you set a boundary. But understanding and excusing are not the same thing. That's the part people get wrong. To understand a pattern is not to forgive the harm. It's to see the machinery behind it. What triggers it? What keeps it going? Who has to adapt around it? What story the person tells themselves so they don't have to stop. Horror gives us extreme versions, because extreme versions are easier to see. Michael's emptiness is impossible to miss. Jason's grief is built into a shrine. John's belief is welded into machines. Jack's rage fills a hotel. Patrick's status panic sweats through his skin. Norman's denial sits in a chair upstairs. Real life is quieter. The room still gets tense before someone speaks. The family still changes the subject. The office still knows who can't handle being outshined. The friend group still avoids one person's triggers. The label still arrives fast because labels make complicated people easier to store. So maybe the question isn't which villain was insane. Maybe the better question is why that word feels so easy. When I call someone insane, evil, toxic, or crazy, am I understanding them better? Or am I giving myself permission to stop looking?